doing a lot of themed PC builds lately, and one of them I haven't done just yet is a black and red themed PC build. Fortunately, this is the Gamdias Neso P1 BR, which is their black and red edition, and I think it's going to be a perfect fit to go ahead and build out a black and red themed PC build, so let's go ahead and dive right into it. Getting started, we do need to go ahead and pick out some components to actually go in this case. I do have a couple things in mind, so let's go ahead and see what I have. So when it comes to picking out a CPU, I definitely want to use 14th generation, just so we can go ahead and build something with the latest hardware. So we'll go with this 14700KF. So for the motherboard, picking that out was actually kind of hard. I'm really thinking I want to go with this B760 Plus Wi-Fi board. This is from ASUS. It's got a really nice all black and kind of like some really slight gray accents, but it's going to be perfect for the 14700KF. Doesn't really have any extra bells and whistles that we really don't need, so we can go ahead and take this board. We're going to need to pair that up. I think we can add some red accents using some RGB RAM. So let's go ahead and get some of this DDR5. This is Corsair Vengeance 5200. It's not too fast, but it'll definitely be what we need for this. And then for storage, just so I can go ahead and get that out of the way, I'm thinking a 990 Pro. Let's go with a 2 terabyte drive for this build. We have all of the main motherboard componentry. Let's get all this assembled, and then we'll go ahead and pick out the rest of the components. So to get started with prepping this motherboard, let's go ahead and pull it out of the box. And now that we have this like this, let's go ahead and get our CPU, RAM, and storage installed onto the board. To get our CPU installed, we can carefully go ahead and raise the actual bar for the retention mechanism, lift up the socket cover, and then we can go ahead and lower the CPU right into place. And just like that, we can go ahead and lower down the socket retention mechanism, pull out the actual socket cover, and you always want to hold on to this as well as your clamshell for any kind of warranty purpose in the future. Installing our system memory, we're going to go in slots 2 and 4 as those are the recommended slots for installing memory into this board. So we can go ahead and slot that into place, and we'll go ahead and hear 2 clicks, and we are good to go. Now for our M.2 drive, we can go ahead and undo the 2 screws for the heatsink, and then we can go ahead and get this installed. Now to actually install the drive, all we got to do is slot that right into place, and then we can use the really cool Q-latch mechanism that ASUS boards have. And then to go ahead and put the heatsink back on, we want to first go ahead and peel off the actual plastic from the actual thermal pad, and then from there we can just go ahead and lower this right back to where it needs to go and get this screwed down. With the motherboard now prepped, the next thing I usually like to do in these type of circumstances is to go ahead and take care of adding the mounting hardware for the actual CPU cooler that we'll be using and installing later, as I'm likely going to be going with some kind of liquid cooling setup. So let's go ahead and pick out a cooler and get that installed. So when it comes to coolers, we have a number of different options. I don't want to do with anything with probably 240s, just because that's going to be a little limiting with a 14700KF. I think these are all 240s back here. So I got 2 different 360 options, and I want to probably go with this Lian Li. This is their GA2 Trinity. This is their Infinity fan one. And I have some Infinity fans that we can go ahead and add on. These are the really nice slotting together fans. So let's go ahead and install this. We'll get the mounting hardware out and go ahead and get that onto the CPU motherboard. I have the mounting hardware out. Luckily it has adhesive, which makes the installation way easier on the back. So we'll go ahead and just prop up the board, go ahead and slot this right into place. Just line that up. There we go. And then once those are all pulled through, we can then go ahead and take these little, basically plastic covers. They kind of sit right over, and they actually hold the screws right where they need to be so they don't move around, as well as it separates it just far enough so the cooler mounts properly. So we'll go ahead, put these spacers in, and we are good to go. So now with the motherboard now fully prepped, we have everything ready to go on this that we need to take care of. Let's go ahead and get this installed into the case. Things about this case when you're building in it, you can actually just pop out both of these panels. They both fold out like that, and all of a sudden you have this really easy space to actually work in. So let's go ahead and get this motherboard installed into it. Installing the board, all we got to do is just line it up with the center peg in the center, and then from there, once that gets sat, we can go ahead and get a screw. I usually like to go ahead and start with one up top, just to kind of get the actual motherboard sitting exactly where it needs to be. And now we can go ahead and take care of the remaining screws. Now I have a fully secure motherboard in place, so let's go ahead and start the pre-wiring process, which is basically where I like to go ahead and run all of the front panel connectors right to where they need to be, and then we'll go ahead and go from there. So let's go ahead and find where all those connectors are around back, and we can go ahead and figure out where we need to route everything. So we can pull this back panel off, which has a pretty cool design, and we can see what front panel connectors we have here. So we have a USB 3.1, this is a Type-C connector. We got a 3.0, HD audio, and a power switch, which is actually pretty limited. So let's go ahead and run all of those, and then we'll go ahead and figure out if we're gonna use cable extensions or not, and go from there. So for plugging in everything, we can go ahead and do our 3.2, this is our Type-C connector. Go ahead and get that plugged in, as well as our 3.0 connector. And then we can go ahead and pull these back to have them exactly where we want them. So let me go ahead and flip this one around, and that's now installed. We also have our power switch, which is going to go into 3rd and 4th pin down below, followed by our HD audio connector, which gets plugged in the bottom left of the motherboard. So with all those pre-wired, now we can go ahead and pull the cables back, kind of cable manage a little bit, and I want to go ahead and also pick out some cable extensions, so let's do that right now. Comes to picking out cable extensions, I have a number of different options, but it does depend on the GPU that we use. So I think I'm actually going to pick out this RTX 4080. So I think we're going to use this one. This is a Zotac card. So let's go ahead and use this guy, but we're going to need a 12 voltage high voltage connector. And I did kind of anticipate doing this build. So I do have some black and red cables. And I believe these have the 12 volt high power connector that we need. So let's go ahead and get this, and we'll go ahead and grab our graphics card as well. Now that we have the cable extensions, let's get these pre-wired. So to do this, what we'll do is basically plug everything we want in on this side, and then we'll plug it into actual power supply later on the back to go ahead and finish up the cable management. This way we can get the exact angles that we kind of want the cables to wrap, and we can kind of play around with the cable combs and a few other things. So our 12 volt high voltage cable, I think I'm going to have come like down and out. So I think I'm going to come through here. So let's go ahead and fish the cables through, and we'll go ahead and leave that right there for now. And then now we got to go ahead and just do the 2 CPU cables. So we have a 4-pin, which we'll go ahead and plug in right up top, and then next to it we have our 8-pin. So let me go ahead and spread the cable comes out just a little bit, and we'll go ahead and slot that right into where it needs to go. And then what we can do is we can fish these up through the top of the case so they're nice and out of the way. And now this makes our cable management process way easier moving forward. So we'll go ahead and get that one out as well. And now we are basically pre-wired, and I can play around with these cable combs, make sure we have everything how we want it, and keep everything nice and organized as we go along with this build. So there we go. So basically that makes the process way cleaner. So now at this point, we're gonna probably wanna go ahead and take care of getting that CPU cooler installed. So let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna put the cooler up top. In this case is kind of interesting. So it has this part that pops off. And then up top, you have a top chamber. This is where the radiator is actually gonna sit, and the fans are gonna sit right below. So what we'll do is, this is actually removable. We got 1, 2, and then the same thing, I think 3 screws, and then another 3 screws on the other side. We'll do is we'll pull that out, we'll go ahead and mount that to the radiator, and then we'll go ahead and bring everything into the case and get the CPU cooler mounted onto the actual CPU. So this cooler does come with pre-installed fans, but we're actually gonna have to take those off and then reinstall them for the actual bracket to work properly so it can actually fit the depth that we need. So let's go ahead and do that. With these now unscrewed, we can go ahead and lift these up, and then we can go ahead and figure out the actual bracket. So I think we want it to face this way, and we're gonna put the radiator like this, and then we'll go ahead and put the fans right on top and screw it right in. So let's go ahead and do that. And just like that, we are now mounted to the actual bracket. We can go ahead and get this installed into the system. So now that we have the actual radiator mounted to the bracket, we can go ahead and slide this right through, lower it down, make sure the cables are ready to go, and slot it right into place. and now all we got to do is screw that down. Now that we have the radiator installed up top, we can go ahead and install some Arctic MX6 onto our CPU before we go ahead and install the water block. With the thermal paste now on, we can now take our water block and we can go ahead and align this exactly where we want it. And then from there, we can go ahead and take our screws and get this installed. Just like that, we have the water block installed. So let's go ahead and get the rest of the fans I want to go ahead and install. I want to do 1 rear as well as 3 up front. And then we can go ahead and slot in our GPU and we'll be good to go with this system. One of the last things we have to do is get these unifans installed. So let's go ahead and do that. As we want this to actually be intake, we're going to go ahead and set these fans up in the back right here. And we'll go ahead and mount that in just a second. And then I also have an additional fan that we'll go ahead and put in the back of the case as well. So let's go ahead and get all of these installed. Now that we got the fans installed and we have all the pre-wiring done, let's go ahead and pick out a power supply. I think the option I want to go with is this Cooler Master. This is an 850 watt. Should be plenty for the 4080 that we're putting in here. So let's go ahead and get that installed. So I went ahead and figured out all the modular cables that we're going to need. So let's go ahead and get these plugged into the power supply. We'll go ahead and mount that and then get these plugged into all of our extensions and all the other accessories that are a part of this build. All right, everything is now plugged in. So we can go ahead and flip this power supply over. And then what we're going to do is just slot it right into its place. Like this, make sure we're not blocking any cables, and I think we are good. So now all we got to do is just screw it in right in the back. And the power supply is now installed, so let's go ahead and wire the system up, and it will be pretty much ready to go as we just have to add a GPU. All right, so now it's for the fun part. So we got to get everything plugged in. So I know we're going to need to get our CPU cables plugged in. Here's one. Here is the second one. And then we have our 24 pin down here as well. So we'll go ahead and get that plugged into the extension. So I believe that goes on this side. Just slot right into place. And then we have our various PCIe cables for that extension as well. So let's go ahead and run these all in. And there we go. So that's all wired, but we do have some SATA devices down at the bottom that also need power. This is for the RGB controller, as well as the actual cooler itself and pump. So let's go ahead and figure out what we got. So we got 1, 2, I believe 3 devices. These are all going to get plugged in at the very bottom down here. So let's get these plugged in. So we can go ahead and just flip that guy around. There's one. We got another one right here. That should be the second device. There's the second one. And then we got our third one as well. Let's flip that right over. And boom. All right, so that's all wired up. So let's go ahead and start to cable manage all this mess because we got a lot of cables, a lot of extensions. Let's see what we can do to kind of clean this up to the best we can, and then we can go ahead and get that GPU installed. So I was able to clean things up quite a bit. There's still a little bit of work I want to go ahead and do, but this is good enough for now just to make sure everything's working, and then we can always clean it up from there. Now the last step we have to finish up this build is to get this GPU installed, and we can go ahead and do this by go ahead and making sure that the latch is down, and then as we already removed the PCIe slot covers, we can go ahead and slide this card right into place. The last thing we have to do with this PC build is just get our extension plugged into place, and we can now go ahead and sort out how we want these cables to run exactly, and everything looks good. So that means our PC build is now done. So let's go ahead, fire the system up, go ahead and get Windows installed and see how everything's running. It's the next day now and this system is now complete. And I gotta say, this black and red build came out way better than I could have even anticipated, and everything just lined up really well when it came to the RGB, the color of the case matching with the cable extensions, and I'm just a huge fan of how everything that came together aesthetically. With that said, this system can only look good, but it also has to perform good. So let's go ahead and run a couple games and see how well the system actually performs. So the first game I want to go ahead and run and see how well the system actually performs is Warzone. So let's go ahead and load up a match real quick, but let's go ahead and first check our settings. So we're going to run at 1080p here. I think I want to go ahead and just run at the Ultra preset, and we'll go ahead and just leave everything stock for that Ultra preset. So let's go ahead and leave things there. We'll go ahead and apply those settings, and then let's go ahead and hop into a solo match right here. So this actually should perform quite well. It's probably not the best suited test for this type of hardware. We probably should be doing 1440p, but this will go ahead and stress it just a little bit. We can go ahead and see some really high refresh rate gaming that you might be able to do with this system. That's really going to be thanks to the high speeds of the 14700KF that's in this system. Less though to the actual GPU, as that's going to make as big of a difference until you start going up in the resolutions that you're playing the game at. So let's go ahead and hop in this match and see what kind of frame rate we're actually getting. So the game ran very, very smooth, and I gotta say, everything ran really well. I'm actually really happy with how that ended up turning out. We were sitting anywhere between about 150 and 200 frames per second the entire time at 1080p ultra settings. So that probably would translate in 1440p closer to probably like that 120 to 144 hertz refresh rate. So that's still gonna be absolutely killer. And we have some of the best gaming components in here. So let's go ahead and hop into another game. I think I'm gonna go ahead and run Fortnite and see how well that actually performs. So before we hop into a match, let's go ahead and configure all of our settings. We're gonna go ahead and just run at the default Epic preset. And I also wanna make sure I turn on hardware ray tracing. And we'll go ahead and hit apply there. And let's go ahead and see what kind of frame rate we're getting. So right now, we're just running around getting about 100 frames per second, hitting the hot, kind of peaking down to the high 90s. But we'll see what happens when we actually hop into a game. And if we turn off ray tracing, we can do that about halfway just to see what kind of difference we're getting. So let's go ahead and just drop immediately. So dropping, we're getting about 130 frames per second, which is actually pretty good. We're only at 1080p here, but with ray tracing, that is definitely much harder to go ahead and run. And the game always looks amazing when ray tracing is enabled. So let's go ahead and let's land here, and let's see what the actual frame rate looks like. Let's get a kill here. Looks like a bot or something. Oh, no, there. Okay, there we go. So let's go ahead and continue. So yeah, we're 110. Pretty solid. Let's get moving here. Oh, somebody right there. But yeah, so basically running around 110, that looks pretty average right there. So yeah, it's definitely not too high, but let's go ahead and disable ray tracing. Let's go ahead and just do this. And let's see what we're doing when we don't have ray tracing enabled here. So now we're just on the default. We should be on the default settings for Epic right here. And if we, right now we don't have any type of super resolution or anything running. So with that, we're sitting about 120. And if we were to turn on, I'm actually kind of curious what would happen if we turn on, let's go ahead and just grab this apple here. Yeah, we're sitting 144 here. If we were to turn on DLSS to go ahead and get some, let's see, let's go DLSS, hit apply. And now, so basically it's going to render at a lower quality in the background, but upscale it to 1080p. So it's probably going to be something like 1600 or Actually, I'm out of ammo. I didn't realize that. Okay, let's go ahead and run. But yeah, we're going to get much higher frame rates when we have that disabled. So like right now, we're sitting with DLSS on right around 139 frames per second. I think when we were in battle, we were a little lower. If we actually stop, we're going to be sitting closer to like that 160 frames per second, which is pretty good at 1080p with a lot of different things going on, especially with the current event happening in Fortnite. So that's actually pretty good. The game's running pretty well. It's very smooth. And you know, like I said, this system is really designed for 1440p gaming. So you're going to be looking at something closer to, you know, probably 100 frames per second on average if you have DLSS on. Without it, probably 75 to 90, just depending on, you know, the configuration and how you tune your settings. You don't always have to run on ultra. You can get pretty much the same, you know, experience and high for most games. So this is just kind of a, you know, pushing the system to its limits. And right now we're just running, we're at 176 frames per second, which is pretty good. So with that said, guys, the system's running pretty good, so let me go ahead and close out the game, and we'll go ahead and go over my final thoughts. As you guys just saw, this system not only looks good, but it also performs quite well, at least in our testing with Warzone and Fortnite. With that said, this system has a lot of potential, and I absolutely love how everything came together on this build. You know, I was kind of a little concerned with getting the black and red aesthetic, you know, to match and everything, but I think everything really came together once I configured the RGB of the fans, memory, and graphics card, as it really just kind of ties all those elements together when you have all those red elements, especially the infinity mirrors on these Lanley Unifans. So I'm definitely a huge fan of how everything came together here. So with that said, if you guys want to see more themed builds like this and you have suggestions, go ahead and let me know in the comments down below, as I want to do more of these. And if you guys want to see some recent ones I did, I'll go ahead and have links to Project Whiteout as well as our Halloween themed PC build to go ahead and check out. With that said, if you guys want to go ahead and see more videos like this, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe for more content.